So welcome, everyone. How's everybody feeling? Okay, 27 months since our last ARC forum, right? How many people, just a quick show of hands, how many people, this is their first event since COVID started? Raise your hands, please. Okay, it's a sign of things to come. See if I can get our slides going. So ARC has asked me to help introduce the logistics of this session. And I thought it was kind of special because, you know, after all, like we haven't had a chance to meet for over 2 years. Right? We've been enduring Zoom and enduring Teams. So I thought about some of the communications that went out and how I might prepare for the logistics and get you ready for one of the best events of the year. And the first thing I thought of was, well, I don't know what business casual is anymore. Right, so let's face it, so we've done these events, we've presented, we've watched webinars, and I don't know about you, but you know, I've got a jacket and a shirt from the waist up, and the waist down, I'm in shorts and flip-flops. So we got that covered, so we're all covered, everybody looks great. And so in addition to that, so we've got a couple of things about the colored dots. Have you noticed the colored dots on your badges? So green, welcome. Please come up and introduce yourself to that person. The yellow dot, yeah, maybe keep your distance a little bit. Red, well, you know, you just want to stay away from that person, right? And then there's the blue dot. I don't know who has the blue dot, but that's give a hug. Have you all seen that one? Okay, so there's a few things I want to go over, and one of the reasons why we're here. So first of all, mute your phones, but keep your phones active because there's a lot of interactive polling that we're going to do throughout the event. Emergency exits. And it's nice to be able to present this because on the last Zoom meeting that I attended, there were no safety moments where you could talk about the emergency exit. The emergency was whether or not the dog was barking when you were trying to do your presentation. So here we are. So if you need to leave, everybody exits out through that door, out through any door that'll take you on the outside. In addition, because we're concerned about safety and industry, have a look at the emergency exit that's on the door of your hotel room. So if there's a fire in the night, you know how to get out. So a little bit about this event. So it is special. We've got 875 attendees, 200 speakers, 100 international from 20 different countries. That is amazing at this point in time. 75 corporate media sponsors and 40 press members. We also have the event hosted on a platform. The platform is called vFairs. So everything is available in that platform. You can log in and you get a lot of the same content, but of course you won't get the interaction with the humans. We have an app, of course, so we want you to do connections. You can scan attendee badges. You can look people up and make those connections. Included in the vFairs app, you're going to have agenda and other forum info, session descriptions, speaker pictures and bios. You'll be able to chat and network with your peers or information sharing with your colleagues. We have a number of mobile tools to help enhance your experience. So if you'd like to find out what people are saying on the back channel, open up Twitter, get a Twitter account, find out what people are saying, because they're probably talking about different sessions and they're using hashtag ARC forum in order to carry that conversation. LinkedIn, you meet somebody, connect with them LinkedIn because they're probably going to post something about this event. And of course, arcweb.com is the source of much of the information, including once this event is completed. We've got some great programs. So this is about industry, digital transformation. We've got a number of programs, automation innovations, APM augmented reality, AI machine learning, IT-OT convergence, cybersecurity, and most importantly, sustainability, energy, and transition. We've got 70 sessions and workshops over the 4 days. We've got 200 distinguished speakers and panelists. Speaker and panel info is available in the app. Now, we'd like to say that since this is such a great event, we'd like you to nominate speakers for 2023. Folks at the back, if you want to come forward, there's lots of seats up front. We don't want anybody standing at the back. This year, instead of a speaker gift, we've decided to make a donation to UNICEF for all of our speakers. Thank you. Now, a little bit about the recordings. You'll see lots of cameras around during the sessions. So they're available in 1 week on our vFairs hosting platform for 4 weeks. They'll also be available on YouTube after 3 to 4 weeks. Please let us know if you don't want one of your recordings made available. What I will say about YouTube is we tend to have over 1 million hits of these videos combined. So if you happen to go to YouTube, look up ARC Advisory Group and do subscribe. Finally, each session has a Q&A panel. So we really do encourage audience participation. So please attend all of the sessions and be sure to have your questions ready for the speakers and panelists. If you have a question, please don't hesitate to ask a member of ARC or stop at the information desk, and we'd be more than happy to answer your questions. And finally, we're here, we're not doing this through Zoom or through Teams or some platform. We're here together, and we wouldn't be together if it wasn't for our sponsors. So I'm just going to list our sponsors one by one. So thank you to Hitachi for being a platinum sponsor, Siemens Global sponsor, ABB Gold sponsor, Armis, AspenTech, Aviva, Bentley, Emerson, Fortinet, GE Digital, Hexagon, Honeywell, Inductive Automation, Intel, Microsoft, Nozomi Networks, OPC Foundation, OpSWAT, Phoenix Contact, SAP, Schneider Electric, Uptake. Right? Without all of these sponsors, we would not be meeting in this event as we are today. Thanks also to our silver sponsors. I won't list them all one by one. Please take a moment to seek them out here at the conference. And thanks also to our industry sponsors, our media sponsors, and there's several of them present. And finally, so with that, what I would like to do is introduce President and CEO of ARC Advisory Group, Andy Chadha. Please join me in welcoming Andy. Thank you, Andy.
Good job. Thanks a lot. Good morning. And welcome. We are really glad to be here. Over the past couple of days, I have spoken with many of you, and every one of you told me you are glad to be here. It's really industry gathering. We were here, obviously, in February 2020, and over the past couple of years, a lot has changed in our personal lives as well as in our business lives. Our lives have gotten more complicated. Our businesses have gotten more complicated. I'm sure we have heard plenty of supply chain issues, and there are so many different things going on in the world today. And also, actually, we noticed in businesses, there have been a lot of new faces, a lot of reorgs. And so we are really glad to see a lot of new folks. And if we could actually do a quick poll to learn actually how many of us are here for the first time. I know many of you are regulars, veterans, and as I mentioned, this is our 20s. Please scan that code on that slide or go to slido.com and enter that code. I know all of you guys have the app on your phones because you needed it to get your badge. So we wanted to make sure that we make use of the technology. So please, take a minute and scan the code, and let's find out how many of you are here for the first time. How many of you are newbies? Okay, it's even more. I personally thought we had about a third or so newbies, but look at this. Yes, there are a lot of new people in our industry. That means gatherings like this are so important because education, our industry is unique. We know OT, we live in OT world. Our industry is very unique, and we really need to learn from each other. And that's why, actually, we meet here every year, and ARC, in fact, does lots of webinars. We do a webinar every month for what we call Digital Transformation Council. It's just end users, so that all end users can actually discuss the issues they are facing every day. So let's see. Hopefully, by the way, while we are talking, I think that number is, very good. It's actually, I knew there were a lot of new people, but that number surprises me as well. So it's great to have all of these newbies here so that we can all learn from each other. Now, second thing, we are really living in a very, very volatile environment. We've been going through this epidemic for the last couple of years. We have all of these supply chain issues. On top of that, we have a war going on. It is really unfortunate that in today's times, we are going to war, and such a brutal war. So economic environment is so challenging right now. For that reason, we also have a speaker this morning who's going to talk about current state of the economy and what to look for going forward. So if we could take another quick poll. In one word, please describe the current state of economy. Just one word. Are you cautious? Are you positive? Are you negative? Just one word. That will actually, we can all learn, all see the results. Great. We can all see how we feel. And we will hear later on from Andrew Oben, Managing Director of Bank of America, a little more about this challenging environment. Really appreciate you guys, folks, taking the time to tell us how you feel. It seems like uncertain is winning right now. Obviously, a lot of challenging. We have optimistic, cautious, all of those things. Really, thank you so much for participating in these two polls. With that, without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dustin Olson, Chief Operating Officer, PureCycle Technologies. Dustin's full bio is in your app. So please, when you have a chance, you can actually read that. And with that, please join me welcoming Dustin to the podium.
So it's a real pleasure to be here. I guess the first thing to say is I'm probably the least qualified digital person in the room to talk about this. The only claim to fame that I have is about 18 months ago, I got into a mile-long text chain with a guy named Jim Hall, maybe some of you know him, about what are we going to do on the digital front with this new technology that we're bringing. And it had a lot to do with, hey, I want to be the smartest plant on the planet. How do we do it? Hey, I think that we ought to have a connected network. Hey, all the work processes ought to really work together. And it just went on and on and on. And Jim and I just kept bantering back and forth. And we ended up inventing this term that we use quite a lot called born digital. And the concept is really that anytime anybody sees anything digital, they're like, I got to have that. Like anybody that works in a plant, they go to a show like this or they go somewhere and they see all of the stuff that's out there. It's like, I got to have that. Like that would make my life so much easier if I just had this, I just had that, smart everything, okay? All the way to the coffee maker and the refrigerator and who knows what else. I want it. The problem is the transformation. So as we got into this concept of born digital, what we really did is we said, we know that we need to be there. We know that we've got to do this. The incremental cost isn't that much. 1 to 2% TIC, that's not small, but that's not that much. I know there's going to be benefits, and I know that I don't want to do it in the future. Like I don't want to transition in the future. So we said, let's skip the transformation and just do digital out of the gate. And so that's really what this presentation is all about. A little bit about who we are as a company, and then more about how we thought about digital out of the gate. Okay, so let's get started. This is the best slide. No, I'm joking. So look, I've got 23 years in the industry. I've worked in refining and olefins and petrochem. I've worked in specialty polymers. I've worked on, say the operations side, the maintenance side, the engineering side, the business side quite a lot. So I've been kind of around the block in multiple different functions. I actually, just a couple of years ago, I lived in Shanghai, and I was able to move to Orlando from Shanghai. That was a great experience. I also spent some time in the Netherlands. I think the only important thing about this slide is that I think that the diversity of experience gained across all the different jobs helps people see a little bit about what's coming around the corner. Like, again, the only thing that I was smart enough to do on digital was smart enough to A, hire the right guy who knows digital really well, and B, smart enough to know that I think this is something we should look at and invest in because I think it's going to be big, okay? So I came to PureCycle about 2 years ago, and why? Because this is an opportunity to revolutionize plastic recycling. There's a lot of different types of recycling out there, and quite frankly, I'm a fan of just about all of it. I think we need lots of different solutions to fix the plastic crisis. I think that there's good solutions in mechanical recycling. I think there are good solutions in chemical recycling. We land a little bit in the middle. We call ourselves advanced recycling, and we deal with polypropylene. And effectively what we do is we manage the solubility of polypropylene so that we can take all of the contaminants out and return back a virgin-like quality polypropylene to the market where customers can use it without compromise. For those that don't know polypropylene very well, it is definitely the best plastic in the world. Okay, I'm a little bit biased. But here are some things that make polypropylene really great. It's one of the lightest. So when you have a choice to make on, hey, I really would like to lightweight this thing, why not start with the lightest plastic? So it floats on water. It's lighter than polyethylene. You've got nylons and polystyrenes and polycarbonates, and they all have their place because depending on the application, you need specific product qualities. But polypropylene is the lightest, and so that has some inherent advantages. It says probably ought to start there. But the other thing that's great about polypropylene is it's so usable. It can be used in clothing, it can be used in carpet, it can be used in your bumper, it can be used in food packaging, it can be used in ag. Everywhere you look, you see polypropylene. So like just as a test for you when you start walking around, you look on the bottom of a piece of plastic, it's got the triangle. The triangle does not mean that it's recycled. It's telling you that it's recyclable, maybe, and then the number tells you what type of plastic it is. So if you think about recycling in general, number one are all the plastic bottles that are out there, that's PET. Number two is the HDPE, that's the milk jugs, and number 5 is polypropylene. So we like number 5. Polypropylene is like 150 billion pounds per year of production every year. It's the largest plastic group made in the world, standalone compared to the others, and it's recycled at a rate that's like less than 5%, okay? So that's not good. So why is polypropylene only recycled at less than 5%? Part of the reason is because it's such a good plastic, okay? As I show in this slide, you know, it's used everywhere. One of the things that makes recycling a little bit easier sometimes is when you have the similar type plastic that you can, let's say, do the same thing to it. If you have lots of color, lots of odor, lots of contaminants, lots of different fillers, it makes it harder. And that's the beauty of polypropylene. It's such a versatile plastic. You put all sorts of stuff in it, use it in carpet, use it everywhere. It makes it inherently more difficult to recycle. Where we come in is we have kind of broken both edges of the let's say the equation. On the front side, it's like we're a whole lot less specific to the type of feed that we need to run. We have a robust technology, so it doesn't matter if it's any of these things on the screen, bring it in, we can recycle it. And then on the other side of the equation is the type of product that we make. It's a really good quality. It's a really high quality product. And what that ultimately means is you can delight your customers. Like you don't have to worry about, the customer doesn't have to worry about adjusting their operation for your recycled plastic. They can just take it like they've taken it before. So big picture, when you do traditional recycling, you take all the plastic, you put it together. Sometimes you sort out different colors. Sometimes it just all goes into one thing and ends up with a dark colored type pellet, and you blend it away. Most of the traditional stories, and it's getting much better, so this is kind of looking back a bit, but most of the traditional stories say that you take the polypropylene and you put it into a trash can, you put it into a park bench, something like that, that you put it underneath the hood of a car, something like that, that doesn't require high quality. You can blend the black color away. What we do is we remove all that and we return the stuff on the right. Okay, so we have this like super crystal clear type product that then anybody can use in transparent applications, colored applications, inside the cockpit of a car, all of these different things, okay? Effectively, what we do is we manage the solubility of polypropylene, so we make it dissolve when we want it to dissolve and remove everything else, and then we make it reappear when we want it to reappear, and then we pelletize it and we shoot it out. Our first commercial plant comes on here in about 6 months. This is, I spoke to this a little too early, but you can see the traditional, the today is blend it all together, push it into a low value product. The tomorrow is a pure cycle tomorrow, where we can take all of those products, purify it, take the odor, take the color, take the everything out, and then put it right back into the supply chain. This is a big deal. There's several cool terms that you can remember. One is called downcycling. That's where you recycle it, but it goes into something that can't be recycled. So it just delays its trip to the landfill. The other is upcycling, where you can take a low value and upcycle it to something better. That's a bit what we do. And then there's true circularity. And true circularity means that you can take the plastic, the recovered plastic, you can put it into your process, you can make a product, they make more product, it comes back to you, you take it again, and it just keeps going around and around and around. And this is the unicorn solution that everybody's been looking for, and I would argue this is what PureCycle does. Okay, so this is a bit of a transition into our born digital concept. Okay, again, we have a new technology that we're bringing to the world, and it's coming. We've got one big plant starting up in Q4. We've got a couple more starting up a year later. We've got things happening around the world. But what we really tried to do was build it on a digital platform so A, we could transition it around the world easier, B, we could train people faster, and C, we would have unlimited capability to just bring data in and do cool stuff with it, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and play this. It's about a minute and a half. Sorry to bore you. but it's a pretty cool video, and it'll set the stage for the next thing. Go ahead.
At PureCycle, we transform polypropylene into versatile, replenishable, ultra-pure resin through our unprecedented purification process that removes odor, colors, and contaminants. Our mission is to revolutionize plastic waste into a renewable resource, and that requires us to rethink plastic recycling. We build on existing ideas so that we can scale faster, run more efficiently, and increase productivity, enabled through a digital plan built today for tomorrow. So we aren't weighed down by concepts that don't work. PureCycle has partnered with Gulfspan to centralize the building of our plants, which allows us to copy and paste our plant modules. This replication approach from multiple production lines at one site location will speed up the building process, decrease operating costs, improve efficiency, and enhance safety. And ultimately, this plant module production strategy helps us quickly grow capacity to produce 1 billion pounds of PureCycle plastic by 2025. Traditional manufacturing plants are dealing with massive challenges of transforming legacy technology platforms to digital. PureCycle's forward-thinking approach means our facilities are born digital. Thanks to our partnership with Emerson, we are building smart facilities from the get-go. PureCycle is leapfrogging to the latest generation of automation technology, employing virtual reality, augmented reality, and artificial intelligence, so projects can be completed faster and operate with world-class performance. It's pure digital. Through our unprecedented purification process and leading-edge approach, PureCycle will change how you view and use plastic. We exist to attack the waste crisis and are about to make plastic cool again. The PureCycle era of plastic recycling is here.
I really like that video. Okay, so that's who we are. All right, so I think it gives you a good idea of how we're trying to integrate the digital into what we're doing. Quite frankly, if you think about what we're really trying to attack with our business plan, the growth rate that we're trying to achieve, it's quite frankly, I don't think possible without digital and without a strong digital platform. I mentioned in the video, there were a couple clips there about Emerson. I'd like to just thank Emerson quickly for the invitation to come here and also the partnership along the way. They've really been an amazing partner to help us get our mind wrapped around all the different aspects of doing what we're trying to do. It's really hard to pull it all together. It's a whole lot of work at the beginning, but we're tackling it because we know it's the right time to do it. Okay, so a bit more about the company, and then I'll get into a few more slides about the digital. We're pretty close to being done, but this is the effective growth plan. We've got a facility in Ohio, which is about 110 million pounds per year, and then we have the capacity for another billion pounds a year in Augusta, but we have 2 lines planned for there, starting up a year from now or a year and a half from now. We've got activity in Europe, and then we also have a partnership with a company called SK Chemical. They just recently changed the name to SK Geocentric, and they're a really good partner for us in South Korea. I was there a couple of weeks ago, and we'll be building a plant there by the end of 2024, okay? Okay, so when you get into the recycling world, I know there's a lot about recycling, not as much about digital at the beginning. We're going to switch. But when you get into recycling, one of the things everybody wants to know is what's your life cycle analysis? How good are you at recycling? And this is one of the things that we do. It's one thing to be subsidized economically to make it work. It's another thing to recycle, but it costs a bunch more energy. Really what you want to do is find that holy grail moment where you can use less energy, use less carbon footprint, and also be economically sustainable. So what we show here is that our carbon footprint relative to virgin polypropylene is like a 35% reduction. That's using Ironton, Ohio's data, which is heavily coal-based. You can see that we're 80% under on energy usage, and our water is about flat, okay? We're born digital, which means born sustainable. We're in the business of reducing the plastic waste in the world and recycling it into a renewable resource, a circular resource. So here's our Born Digital philosophy. Okay, so the only thing we really believed out of the gate was that if we don't do digital now, it's going to be tremendously more difficult in the future. Our point is that the digital transformation everybody wants to do, everybody falls in love with digital, but everybody gets scared by the transformation. And when you look at the cost profile, I don't know the exact numbers, but what we say is that the D is cheap and the T is 10 times the D. Okay, so the transformation just costs a lot more than digital. So if you get into it right out of the gate, then you've got a better chance of being successful. But I would tell you that I think you have to have the right team, the right vision for what you want to do, because building that digital foundation, not just so it's good for what's available today, but so it can be bolted on and built into the future is very important. I think mindset's a big deal. When we start talking about the transformation aspect of doing digital, one of the biggest problems is getting people to believe in it. So how do you convince somebody to do something that they've been doing for 30 years and they think it's fine, and now you got this new thing you want them to do? Being born digital means that this is who we are, this is what we're going to do, and everybody gets on board with it early, and you don't have to perpetually convince people it's the right thing to do. I do believe that when we do this, we're going to train faster, we're going to train better, we're going to move faster, we're going to be able to copy and paste work processes across our plants much more effectively, and I think ultimately that will help us get there in a more efficient way. But then once we are running, I don't really know how much value we're going to create when we run. Okay, I know that when we can do predictive maintenance versus reactive maintenance, you win. I know that when you have good integrated training, you win. I know that when you have lots of data that can be organized in a way that it becomes useful information, then you win. And I know that if you don't have those things, you're always chasing your tail and hoping and wishing that you had. And so I believe that once we build this system, we'll be able to really integrate it all together so that we can do these great things. Why does it matter? Okay, so we've got a couple of really cool things happening for PureCycle. A, we're ESG, we're recycling. I was 22 years in multiple, let's say, oil and gas, refining, petrochem, specialty polymers. You know, and as I got further away, and I'm a fan of all of it, but as we got further away from refining and got closer to specialty polymers, my kids started to like me more. And then I got home and I was like, hey, Daddy just made a bumper. And they're like, yeah, cool. So like, even when I was specialty polymers and doing cool stuff like making a polymer that's really good for a bumper on a car, it wasn't until you said, but we sold it to Tesla, did they care. But now that we're in recycling, I mean, I feel like I'm a hero, at least for like 2 days. Okay, I'm back to where I was before now, but being in recycling is just cool because you feel like you're doing something good for the future. You feel like you're doing something good for the world, and everybody can win in this. It's not a I win, you lose type scenario, so we're very excited to be there. So we've got that going for us, but the other thing is that when you have a digital platform and you're talking digital to the younger people that are coming into the workforce, I mean, they're all in. They're like, I love it. This is great. Or you bring folks that have been in the industry for 15 or 20 years, and they're like, I've been wanting to do this for 30, they've only been there for 15. I've been wanting to do this for 15 years. So our ability to attract people into our company is pretty strong. I think driven a lot because we're new, we're growing, it's fun. A lot because it's recycling, you got a chance to change the world. But quite frankly, and if this will probably grow over time, I think it's also because we're digital. I think that people just love the idea of being digital, and they see an opportunity to really do it in a big way. You know, we're really trying to think about digital across the entire ecosystem. It's got a component of safety, it's got a component of training, it's got a component of operational excellence. You know, it's got it's got a component of artificial intelligence, data mining, regression, all these things are cool. Okay, so it really, I think the digital philosophy matters. Again, I mentioned this already. Big shout out to Emerson. I consider them one of our key core partners. I think there's an interesting, and this is probably heresy to say in a group like this of diverse industries and providers, and there's a place for everybody to play. But one of the benefits that we have seen is that Emerson has helped to provide us a wholesale package. And when you can kind of buy and integrate from the same place, you have an opportunity to minimize some of the barriers between different information connections. And I think that we're going to see good benefit of that over time. Plus, I'll tell you, in a world where supply chain is a real pain in the neck, having a partner that's deep, wide, engaged, helpful, can get you out of a jam in a time or two. I mentioned this a bit, but really we're trying to build an entire ecosystem. It's probably the wrong time for us to be building a full digital ecosystem for our plant because we've got a lot going on everywhere, and this is another thing. But we believe it's the right time because if we do it now, it will serve us forever. And so the idea of integrating maintenance processes, smart 3D, smart P&IDs, it's really a way to integrate all of your key work processes into a digital ecosystem so it's easier for people to use and easier for them to do it right and easier for them to do it well. This is a quick slide. I think I've got one or two left here, but the idea of high performance, what does it do for operability? Like, we're going to have the tablets in the field. We're going to have high performance graphics. Alarms are going to be right out of the gate. It's not going to be a rationalization effort down the road. Ergonomic designs. We're going to have an integrated hub in Orlando. Seems a little odd to be in Orlando, but this is where our headquarters is. And all of our plants are going to connect into a hub from around the world. It will not be a control location because we're worried about connectivity and delays, but it'll be a monitoring location to where everybody can see what's going on and then basically have a second set of eyes watching so that when the predictive maintenance says, hey, control valve's failing in 5 weeks, or the indicators start blinking saying, hey, you might have a problem with SIS in the future, whatever, we'll be able to see it here and help. The mobility concepts. And I'm very excited about the AI. AI is the hardest thing to sell to anybody that's not a believer because it's like, trust us, the computer will figure it out. And like the idea of AI, unleashing AI to solve problems and to do the regressions that are difficult for humans or difficult for people to do, I think is going to be really beneficial down the road. But that's going to be a wait, gather data, and see what we can do. Okay. So look, I really appreciate your time. You guys, all of you have just loads more experience than I do on this topic. But I'm very thankful to all of you for helping develop the ecosystems over the last 20 or 30 years so we have a chance to do something like this. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about what we're doing with PureCycle. It's our passion. We feel like we're changing the world, and we're really excited to take it to the next level. So thanks, everybody.
Yeah, great, thanks. Great. Wow. Less than 5% of plastic is recycled. Wow. We have a long way to go in sustainability. And obviously, as Dustin mentioned, sustainability right now is a priority for all of us and around the world. And again, I don't know if that statistics is global or just the U.S., but we got a long way to go. Thank you so much, Dustin. Okay, next I would like to introduce Andrew Oben, Managing Director of Bank of America, who will give us his vision about the current state of economy. With this, please, Andrew. Stage is yours. Thank you so much.
Okay, here's the clicker. Let's see how it works. Okay. So I'm Andrew Oben. I'm Managing Director at Bank of America Equity Research. I cover what's called the category called electrical equipment and multi-industry. So I cover companies like General Electric, Honeywell, Emerson, Rockwell Automation, and over the past several years, as software has become more and more central to what these companies do, I actually started covering industrial software companies as well, like Ansys and Aspen and PTC. So I guess the goal of the presentation is that I'm going to talk about the macro environment, specifically focusing on CapEx, inflation, and then I'm going to segue into, how does Wall Street think about software valuations, and sort of, big industrial companies getting into software, I think was more of a financial focus. And I've been lucky enough to be invited here over the past couple of years, so just want to sort of describe what has changed over the past 12 months. I feel there is a lot more visibility on CapEx going forward. I think there is a lot more inflation, and you did see that I think that's a huge source of uncertainty. And, from a Wall Street perspective, there has been a lot more software M&A, right? Industrial companies buying software companies. And of course, if you care about software and if you care about software stocks, there's been a bit of a sort of NASDAQ sell-off, to use sort of a term like that. So the first chart that I have goes over long-term CapEx outlook for the US. And I want to say that I am actually very, very positive long-term. I think that we are on the cusp of the strongest CapEx cycle in probably 20, 30 years. I just came back from Hannover Messe. What I can tell you is that met with a lot of, I guess, folks in the room. I think near-term visibility is actually okay, albeit everybody recognizes a huge, huge amount of uncertainty. So I think the real trick is bridging this outlook for the next month or two with the outlook, for the next 3 to 5 to 10 years. So what I want to focus on, why are we bullish? So this chart really focus on the upper left corner, trend over the last 20 years, right? You have shrinking tech capacity in the US. That has been the single largest driver of deindustrialization in North America, globalization of supply chains, and CapEx focusing on productivity rather than capacity additions, right? And you can actually see at the bottom of this chart growth in US manufacturing capacity, right? You see steady growth in the 80s and the beginning of the 90s. You see a big spike in capacity additions, which is actually the tech bubble in the US. And then starting in 2000, between the tech bubble collapse and China joining WTO, you can actually see that it's been very little new capacity added in North America. Of course, that means that the focus has shifted away from capacity to productivity. And believe it or not, in this environment with very low top-line growth, it created new operating paradigm where companies were able to focus on efficiency in a relatively low growth environment. And if you know anything about your companies, margins have been going up and up and up for 20 years. So it's been pretty bad in terms of CapEx, but actually incredibly good for operating efficiency. So we think this paradigm is almost done. We think going forward, things are going to look very differently. And specifically, an upper right corner, what you do, and by the way, if anybody wants to email me, happy to send you the data. What you have is that we looked at growth in manufacturing CapEx. So from 2007 to 2019, the CAGR was 2.8%. If you look at the semiconductor announcements, right, and this is TSMC, Intel, Samsung, this is what has been announced already. There is some uncertainty how much supply chain it's going to drag with it, right, how many fabs TSMC is going to add. So I have a percentage point here adding to growth over the next 5 years, maybe 1 to 1.5 percentage points. Second, we do make an assumption that
there's not going to be a lot more outsourcing, right? We're not saying things are coming back, but what we are saying is that there is this economic measure called mix of imported intermediary goods. Right now, U.S. imports roughly a quarter of components of what we make is going to stay stable, and it actually has been stable over the past several years. So if that stays stable for the next 5 years versus the past decade, adds another percentage point to growth, right? And then finally, we have been spending, the government has been spending. So the announced U.S. stimulus adds probably another 1 to 1.5 percentage point to growth. So your starting point for the past decade plus, you grew at 2.8%. If you take everything that has been announced already, right, that gets you to growth 6-7%. So the rate of growth of CapEx, based on what has been announced already, we think easily can double over the next 5 years. And with that, I want to add that this does not include automation spending that we think is going to be driven by inflation, which I will touch. And certainly this does not touch any potential reshoring, right, that could come from adding trailing edge chip capacity in North America, which is also happening. So I think this is a fairly conservative base case scenario. Now, if you go to the next slide, we do think CapEx is going to look different. Structurally, we do think there will be a lot more additions to equipment and structures, but we also think that over the past, this has been going on for 50 years, you can see intellectual property, right? The industry has changed a lot. Back in 1970, intellectual property represented maybe 16% of fixed assets for manufacturing companies in the US. Today, it's 34%. So from that perspective, I think the genie is out of the bottle. Even though we are going to spend more on sort of equipment, we also continue to spend a lot more on digital. So let's just talk about what's happening with inflation. So chart on top, right, it's a big issue. And I think it's a huge source of uncertainty in the market. It's a huge source of uncertainty in the economy. So on top, you have US manufacturers produce a price index. And in April of 22, it hit 18.6%, which I think has been the highest number in over 40 years. So I think all of you lived this. And on top of it, hopefully you lived that part as well, US manufacturing wages have been accelerating and also hitting sort of 40-year highs. Now, if you are sitting at the corporate level, right, and if you look, what does it do? So next slide is actually what we did. We aggregated gross margins for the companies that we cover. And you can see, surprise, surprise, right, inflationary pressures. Now 2020 decline is COVID, but you can see that despite fairly good top line, right, gross margins continue to decline as inflation is putting pressure on what's happening. And frankly, my view is that this is structural, right? The paradigm that I have described over the past 20 years, very little investment, focus on efficiency, right? Industrial margins went up as a straight line for 20 years. We think this is over. We think that you will have to reinvest in working capital. You will have to reinvest in inventory. And frankly, if you are going to sort of break up your supply chains and localize them, you're going to create natural inefficiencies, and you are going to bring back capacity to places like Europe, maybe places like North Africa and Europe, and in the US, right, maybe North America and Mexico. All of this costs money. All of this is going to impact margins, but we do think you are going to get a lot more growth. So that's going to be the trade-off, right? For the past 20 years, very little top-line growth, right? Great margins. I think going forward, at least, for the next 5 years, let's call it, I think you're going to get a lot more growth, assuming we get whatever air pocket is coming our way. But margins, I'm not sure margins are going to be sustainable. And I also think you will have to carry permanently more working capital, more inventory, right? So I think that's the new paradigm. So the next slide is actually very interesting. The reason we are excited, is just I've outlined to you the base case for CapEx. So we also ran numbers and we looked at correlation between wages and automation spending and efficiency spending at factories. It takes 2 years for corporates to figure out that higher wages should lead to automation spending, right? And I've heard anecdotes. It's just, look, companies are very, very slow moving, and it just takes 2 years. But the point is that what is happening right now, these wages that are the highest in 40 years are going to drive CapEx in 2 years, right? Spend on automation. And the reason we know we're not making it up, I was at an analyst meeting for one of the largest companies that I cover, a company that it's at this meeting. They are doubling their CapEx spending on automation in 22. They're doubling it again in 23. And this is all a result of what transpired in 21, right? So, you know, the 22 stuff is not even in the plan. So we actually think that we're going to have a lot of automation spending, you know, assuming people get semiconductor chips. So the next one is, you know, and interestingly enough, we listen to earnings transcripts. I don't know if many of you do it, but, you know, public companies hold conference calls with investors and analysts, and you can actually use software, I think like basic form of AI, to sort of track keywords, right? And you can see, guess what? Automation, the mention of automation on these calls is going up, and it's going up dramatically. The other thing what you can also see in the data, historically, U.S. has not been a country that has used a lot of robotics, right, compared to countries like Korea. I think there was a Wall Street Journal article about it recently. So you can look at the data. We are actually importing more industrial robots. So not only companies are talking about it, they are actually doing something about it. So the next slide, just going to shift a little bit, just go into software. And manufacturers today, just to give you a sense, property, plant, and equipment spending for manufacturers today is $200 billion a year, roughly, of which only $100 billion is equipment. Manufacturing companies today spend roughly $140 billion a year on software, right? So manufacturers today spend more on software than they spend on equipment to actually make things. So that's, I think that's very interesting. What we think is also interesting, and I know it's a huge focus for a lot of folks in the room, is that how little oil and gas industry spends. So you can see is that in 2014, before oil prices collapsed, oil and gas industry spent roughly the same amount as manufacturing industry on PP&E. But on the same, you know, it's gone down, it's probably going to go up. So on the same basis, just appreciate that manufacturers spend $140 billion on software. Oil and gas industry spends a whopping $9 billion on software. And I think that's why, frankly, oil and gas is such a huge focus for a lot of the stands here because, you know, not very efficient. We ran numbers. It takes the same number of people to lift a barrel of oil out of the ground today as it did 40 years ago, right? If I think any of your companies had this kind of efficiency, they probably would be out of business. Another very interesting way to think about oil and gas industry versus manufacturing, right, is that back in 98 when oil was, I don't know, like $14 a barrel, actually oil and gas and manufacturing spent relatively the same amount of money on IP, right, on intellectual property. And then manufacturing industry became a lot more mature. They were not allowed to grow. They had to become more efficient to survive. So you can see the spending on IP has been going up for the past 20 years. Right, oil and gas industry went through the growth cycle, so it was growth, 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 so no need to spend on efficiency. So we actually think that between shareholder pressure to spend money in a more efficient way, between energy transition, between requirements to manage emissions better, we actually think oil and gas industry is likely to shift in a more mature stage. And actually, we're very bullish about what's going to happen there, even more bullish than manufacturing, because they have to become more efficient. And becoming more efficient, we're not making a call how much money they're going to spend. We are making a call that they are going to spend money very, very differently going forward and spend a lot more on automation and software. So this is the setup. So as you can see, you know, we are arguing more CapEx, and software will continue to be a key area of spending for the corporates. So guess what? I'm not the only one figuring it out. You know, corporates have figured it out, and you can see industrial firms' acquisition of software are going up and up and up. It's becoming bigger and bigger theme, right? Over the past couple of years, there are some key transactions that I think all of you know, and we think there's going to be more. So we think software is a key area of growth. There's more CapEx coming. Companies have to figure out how to spend money more efficiently, and they'll continue to buy software assets. The other thing is that I think the title of this slide is a little bit misleading. It's still traded premium multiples. Actually, they do trade at a premium multiples of EBITDA. But what's interesting, if you look at software companies on trading on DCF basis, actually software assets are very, very cash generative. So from that perspective, the valuation gap between industrial companies and software companies is a little bit narrower. And if you look, this is how Wall Street looks at valuations, right? EV, EBITDA, enterprise value, which is equity value of the company, plus net debt, divided by EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. And as you can see, for industrial companies, the market is quite rational. If companies have higher return on tangible assets, the market places a higher multiple on it, right? But you can see that the three software names that we cover, Aspen, Ansys, and PTC, trade actually quite a bit above industrial companies, and that's because software assets over time grow quite a bit faster. They grow, at least 2 times. On a previous slide, you can see that software spending has grown at twice the rate of underlying CapEx, and that's so you can see that. And then the big debate in my world is, this software crash. You see a lot of it on CNBC. So does this mean it's a great time for industrial companies to go and buy software? And the answer is maybe, because the software multiples have collapsed, except they didn't. Software multiples have gone back to where they were pre-COVID. Now, I think the multiple compression is more pronounced as SaaS names, even more pronounced with SaaS names that sort of fall short of the rule of 40 or don't make money. But the issue is, I think if corporates were making a decision whether to sort of make or buy software, right? On the surface, it looks like, oh my God, look at the multiples, they've all gone down. You're where you were 2 years ago, right? If 2 years ago you couldn't pull a trigger, guess what? Valuations are not that different today from where they were 2 years ago. Now, and the issue is, and I've had the same slide a couple of years ago, that's the issue. The issue is software continues to grow faster than hardware, albeit we are quite a bit more constructive on hardware growth. And this sort of compares to you, where you were 7 years ago in terms of market caps versus where you are today, despite this big decline in software multiples, right? And the idea is that a lot of the software names are worth 2, 3, 4 times what they were worth 7 years ago. And this goes back to my point, your decision, make or buy, right? And it's a hard decision, right? Because making it culturally is very, very difficult. I cover a number of companies that have really struggled culturally, right? Building a software culture inside a diversified industrial conglomerate is very tough. Buying things are also tough because, software engineers hate guys on the factory floor, right? It's just they don't get along. So you have to figure out the culture. You have to get that right. But the point is, the longer you wait, the tougher it gets because software just outgrows hardware and will continue to do so, even as hardware probably going to look a lot better than it did over the past 20 years. So with that, just to summarize, look, our view, very optimistic about CapEx, very optimistic about CapEx in America. We think the paradigm over the past 20 years is going away. We think it's going to look very different, at least this decade. Having said that, software and automation continues to remain very central to what these companies do, and we think it will continue to outgrow core equipment spending. And all of you guys are still not off the hook thinking how to sort of strategically implement it inside your companies. And with that, I want to thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Great. Thank you, Andrew. Both Andrew and Dustin, they will be with us on the panel that we will have later on this morning. So please write down your questions. You can write on your app if you choose to, or notes and so forth. And obviously, we will be calling on you for questions for the gentlemen. We have one more short presentation, and we, ARC, as you folks know, we conduct research on our industry, all the way from instrumentation, sensors, to ERP. And over the last year, we also conducted actually research on a global basis, trying to actually figure out who are some of the leading companies in digital transformation. Because every company right now is obviously, focused on digital transformation along with sustainability. So next, I would like to ask Greg Gorbach, Vice President at ARC, who led this research, to talk about the research that we did to come up with who some of the leading companies are. With this, I'd like to invite Greg to the podium. Yeah.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Greg Gorbach with ARC, a Vice President and Manager here, heading up our digital transformation team of analysts. And today I want to talk about this important new report that we released earlier this year about the digital transformation top 25. So let me see if I can figure this out. So, this report allowed us to gain some insight, just the process of working through this report. We followed a pretty rigorous process, but it allowed us to gain some insight about what are these leaders doing and how do they become, why did they rise to the top of our report? So some of the things that we identified are shown here. And the first is hyperconnectivity. Everything's getting connected, sensors and assets, and devices and people and processes, these are all getting connected. And that connectivity lets companies then apply the data that they gain from that, and along with some advanced analytics and cognitive technology and AI and machine learning. This allows these companies to generate more value from their resources, to develop new products and services and business processes, to improve their productivity and resilience and agility, and importantly, to imbue a data culture throughout their organization. And that's because these companies can focus on the talent of their, in their workforce, and that's, of course, trying to acquire some 21st century skills. This is part of the equation. But also, taking these technologies and allowing you to have remote workers and connected workers take the work to the workers instead of the workers to the work. These leading companies have already started to emphasize climate and societal impact issues within their purview. So these companies are often leading thinkers in this area. Sustainability and ESG matter. It's getting more and more attention. Investors are paying attention to it. And these companies are in part leading the way. Another characteristic of these companies is that they are focusing on improving their business models, their digital business models, focusing on their customers, whether they're, it's a B2B or a B2C kind of organization. They're changing their business processes and structures, and they're trying to focus on becoming a customer-centric, competitive excellence company. So it's really kind of an outside-in. The transformation is all about, doing a better job in positioning your company. Of course, these companies are looking at digitalizing their supply networks to become more intelligent and dynamic and resilient. And as Andrew Oben just pointed out as well, software. It's all about software for a lot of these companies. So these are the industrial digital transformation top 25 companies that we've identified. And you can see that they cover quite a range of industrial space. So there's a big group in the pharma and biotech sector, but we've also got companies represented in machinery and aerospace and automotive and high tech, consumer goods and chemicals and energy and mining. So it's quite an array. And we've got 25 companies shown here on the list. So what else did we learn in the process of putting this whole report together? Well, first is that these companies are motivated by external market signals. By looking out to the marketplace, the companies tend to ask the right questions, which leads them to put the right kind of transformation program in place to support their differentiation relative to answering those questions. We looked at performance, because we thought, hey, maybe companies that are performing very well are those that are digitally transformed. And yeah, sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's exactly the opposite that's true. Sometimes the companies that aren't really doing that well are the ones that are motivated and say, hey, this is why I'm transforming, because I have to. And really everybody has to, but some companies feel it a little more acutely. Another thing that makes a digital transformation leader is leadership with regard to their workforce. So, companies that are strong digital transformation companies focus on innovation, which is change, which means a big impact on your culture. So these companies can focus on business outcomes that differentiate, as we talked about earlier. But it's also important for these leaders within the companies to explain what's this transformation, what's it going to look like, and how's it going to affect people, because that's really what's going to matter to making it successful. And in the process of doing that, of course, these companies also realign their incentives with a new vision. And finally, every company needs their own transformation experts to help guide and drive this process. And what we find over and over again is that the best digital champions are those who leverage expanded peer groups. They don't just look within their company, they don't just look within their industry, but they learn from others outside of their organization and outside of the industry. And that's why we're all here today, isn't it? So for us, to put the report together, we landed on this definition for digital transformation. It's the integration of digital technology into all areas of business, fundamentally changing the way companies operate and deliver value to customers. The organization is typically charged to innovate and improve across multiple dimensions, including the digital technologies, but also culture and leadership and operational agility, workforce engagement, customer experience, ESG, and competitive performance. So the report looks like this. We focused, we have a front matter with some analysis and trends and findings. We have the list of the companies, the top 25 companies, and the scores. And I'll go into that a little bit here. We've got profiles for each of the top 25 companies. and then some additional profiles from some companies that didn't appear on the list but are clearly transforming. And then we have, within the report, a methodology deep dive. We just explained the definitions and industries and, you know, why we included companies and why we excluded companies. And, you know, weighting and other factors. So we've got a lot of details there. And then we've got a looking forward section. So it's a really interesting report. The first, you know, we have I'll just take a couple minutes here and go through how we went about this. And it's basically a 4-step approach that we took. First step is to identify the candidate companies. And for this part, we, you know, realized that since we wanted to include some financial data, we wanted to look at companies, large industrial companies who have their public data, their data available publicly. We looked at technology users and selected about 200 from that list. Now, we recognize that there are a lot of companies that are not technology users that are doing great things in digital transformation. And you know, all of our sponsors and all of the suppliers and vendors folks that we have here are all doing interesting and amazing things in digital transformation. So thank you, but we didn't include you in our report. The next step was to reach out to our community. And we tapped our community of digital transformation knowledgeable folks from across industry. We looked at you know, folks we know, folks who are in our community. We have some academics in the group. We have some folks from industry organizations. And we have a global community of folks that we tapped. And we asked them to help us select from that group of 200 companies the top 25. And we did the same with our ARC analysts. And then we took just combined all that data together with an algorithm that, you know, popped out the top 25 companies. You know, based on those things, the financial metrics and the digital transformation metrics and the collective wisdom. And then finally, we interviewed as many of these top 25 leading companies as we could, you know, put together our analysis and wrote up the report. The industries that we included are those that, you know, you see represented here. You know, the companies that you guys are either part of or that you serve. I won't go through the whole list, but it's a familiar list. This is our group. And these are the components of the algorithm. So we looked at financial indicators and transformation indicators and collective intelligence. Those are the 3 big buckets. And as we said, you know, so that means that we use publicly available data, also ARC proprietary research data, and our community input. So we combined all that together, and all those factors combined to yield a score for each company. And then the top score, the top 25 scores, are the top 25 companies in our report. So that's the basic methodology. And all this detail is in the report itself, so you can get that here. If you'd like to get a copy, I think they're kicking around here somewhere at the event are available some InTech magazine copies that have a nice article about this report, so that's available here. If you'd like to download a copy, you can download it from this QR code or from this advice, or basically go to arcweb.com. And I think it's also available through the app in your swag bag. So there are a number of different ways you can get the report. And then I'd like to put out a request, you know, to folks here who would like to help us and who are a little bit knowledgeable about digital transformation and would like to help us by being part of the community that helps us select the leading candidates. So we look to, I mean, this is an important piece, that collective intelligence of our community is really a big piece of the score. And we would invite any end users or members of industry organizations or members of academia who would be interested to help us. Please sign up now. You can let me know, or you can use the QR code or the web address that's shown here on the slide. So we'd really welcome that. Also, I'd like to point out that we have several of these top 25 companies here at our event, and tomorrow morning's keynote is going to really feature some of those companies, along with a sort of a deep dive and focus on what makes them great and what makes digital transformation and what makes them leaders. So please pay attention to that keynote session tomorrow. And with that, I would just like to wrap it up and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Greg. We have a few minutes, and what I want to do is take the time to really introduce those of you who have not used the app. There's a lot of information in the app. First of all the attendee list is on your app. If you go to the app, log in with the same username and password that you registered for this forum, and you download the vFairs app to your phone and then log in with the same credentials, and then you will see it's available on your phone. And there is a complete attendee list, and actually, in fact, you can even chat with some of your colleagues. You could also exchange the contact information with your colleagues, because a lot of these days, a lot of us are not carrying business cards. You want to exchange the contact information, you can do that with the app. You simply scan the other person's code. And also, by the way, the list of all the sessions is also available on the app. You have to click on Auditorium. If you click on Auditorium, it will take you to all the sessions and session descriptions. And along with that, it will also show you all the speakers and each session and their bios and pictures. In addition, you can also go to all the exhibitors. And by the way, every exhibitor, including actually ARC, we have a real booth next door, but they all have what we call virtual booths as well. And there is a lot of good information on these virtual booths. For example, the report that Greg just talked about, this report, you can download it. It is in your, actually, it's in your swag bag. In fact, already put in. So all you have to do is download that report. So besides this report, there are many other ARC reports as well. And the same also links to actually some really very useful videos. So it's not only on the ARC booth, but also all of these exhibitors. If you want to actually learn a little bit about them, there's information on their virtual booths. And as you folks know, also a week later, in 2 weeks, a week later, we also have a virtual forum. That's when all of these presentations, in fact, will be played again. So if any of you, for example, we have 5 tracks here. This afternoon, we are going to break this room into 2. This is track 1, 2, and then track 3, 4, 5 are in the back. So I know you can't attend all of those. So, but all the presentations are being video recorded, and they will be on our app platform. So you will be able to listen to them whenever you have availability. And as I mentioned to you, you can also exchange messages with your colleagues. You want to meet with somebody, Yeah, and there are actually other folks you can chat with. So please make use of the app. There is a lot of information, and you will have this even when you go back. So it could be very handy tool for all of you. With this, we like to break now. We have a 30-minute break. All the refreshments will be in the next room, and we will start our panel session and a couple of short presentations at 10:30. Again, I want to thank you very much. And once again, please give a hand to our speakers. Thank you so much. Yeah. And they will all be here with us in the panel session. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.